What would you do if you were suddenly asked to leave your seat, the one you paid for with your own hard work, just because someone else decided you didn't belong? Would you stay silent or would you stand up? This isn't a hypothetical question. This is a true story about two young women with big dreams and relentless determination who were suddenly forced to face a prejudice deeper than they ever imagined. Follow me as we explore the journey of Elise and Jada, twin sisters who didn't just fight for their seats on a luxury high-speed train, but for fairness, dignity, and the basic respect that so often gets lost in today's world. Their story isn't just about a single incident. It's the voice of millions who are still yearning to be seen, to be treated with kindness, and to be acknowledged as equals. You'll be surprised by what happened next. A phone call, a decision that shook an entire corporate system, and a media campaign that sent shockwaves through the U.S. transportation industry. Let's dive into this powerful, emotional story together. At the Aurora Link Express Terminal in Seattle, there is a place where noise seems almost prohibited. People call it the Prestige Lounge, a space wrapped in white marble where soft golden light spreads across the high, curved ceiling, and Debussy's soothing melodies flow through every corner as if to calm those used to having the world bow at their feet. Every step taken here is featherlight, each sound of a heel strike perfectly restrained, as if sound itself is taboo. In this world, the most valued things make no noise. The silence here isn't a condition, it's a statement, and it is also a boundary. Elise and Jada Morrison sat quietly beside a low walnut table, right next to the glass wall overlooking Track 3, where the Aurora X9 high-speed train would depart in 1 hour to take them to Vancouver for a pitch presentation on the fintech startup they'd built over the past 3 years. Elise, the elder sister, wore a minimalist beige knit outfit, her hair in a low bun, her face lightly but sharply made up. Beside her, Jada, 3 minutes younger but often the more striking of the two, wore her high-bunned afro in a vibrant expression. Both wore plain white sneakers, unbranded, not for show, just precision. They weren't trying to prove anything, but they also weren't hiding who they were. They sat there as though they had belonged their whole lives, but both knew their presence was never assumed in places like this. Elise glanced at her watch, a flat-faced stainless steel mechanical piece, a gift from their father after they successfully closed their pre-Series A funding round. 10:01 a.m. 59 minutes, she said without looking up from her phone. Got it, Jada replied, eyes still on the tablet screen, reviewing the presentation on AI-integrated credit application processing. Did you check the checklist? Done, Elise said. Stop asking. Are you sure? Last time you forgot the quarterly growth slide. Because you uploaded the wrong file. Please, genius, Jada scoffed. I'm the creative. You're the control. Don't swap roles. Elise smirked. Creative enough to almost send the pitch deck with your high school doodles. Jada didn't respond. She chuckled lightly, then exhaled. Elise turned to look at her sister. You okay? Yeah, Jada replied, but couldn't mask the hesitation. Elise didn't press. She knew that feeling well, the one they call being out of place, even when you've paid the full price to be there. That feeling when the people around you don't see you as another guest, but as someone who snuck into a rich people's party without an invitation. I don't do well in places like this, Jada murmured, but you still came. Elise answered, We have tickets, Jada. We have as much right to be here as anyone. Not everyone thinks so. That's not our problem. We don't need their thoughts, just our own. Jada nodded, though her eyes stayed fixed on the now cold green teacup on the table. They'll look, she whispered. Elise nodded. Let them. In the room, the clinking of spoons, the flipping of newspaper pages, the soft roll of suitcases on carpet, all blended into a kind of silence unique to wealth. No one stared at them for long, but no one fully ignored them either. A man in a light gray linen suit reading the Financial Times glanced at them for a second, then looked away. An older woman in a navy pencil skirt walked past their table, lips pressed tightly, walking slightly faster than usual. The stares lasted only fractions of a second, but they were enough for the sisters to know how they had been categorized. Not as partners, not as speakers, but as outsiders. And then, at 10:14 a.m., The atmosphere shifted. Not through noise, but through a kind of sharp, silent motion. A white woman in her mid-50s entered, wearing an ivory cashmere blazer, a loosely tied Hermes scarf around her neck, and a heavy Louis Vuitton leather bag on her right arm. Her platinum hair was perfectly coiffed and unnaturally glossy. Every step she took made a soft but distinct clack, clack, clack that prompted people to look up. Following her was a young lounge attendant. His name tag read, Andy. "I understand, Mrs. Prescott," Andy whispered, "but the seating system has already been locked." "Nothing is unchangeable," she cut him off without turning. "I'm not used to hearing the word no in places where I'm a valued guest." Elise and Jada looked up. Andy saw them and quickly averted his gaze. But Mrs. Prescott didn't. She stopped, looked at the sisters with a distinct expression, not quite contempt, but certainly not fairness. "Excuse me," she said. "I might be mistaken, but are you two sitting in seats 1A and 1B? "Yes," Elise replied. "I believe there's been a minor issue," she continued. "My husband was assigned seat 1C, but due to a system glitch, I was moved to 9E. That's two cabins apart. With his health condition, that's unacceptable." Jada met her eyes. "And you'd like us to move to 9E? If it's not too much trouble, we're happy to offer a voucher or a special meal." Elise shook her head lightly. "We selected 1A and 1B 4 months ago for personal reasons. I'm afraid that won't be possible." Mrs. Prescott's mouth curled. "That's unfortunate. I've been a Heritage Platinum member for over 15 years. I'm usually prioritized." Jada straightened her back. "Are you saying your privileges matter more than our legal choices?" "I'm saying," she said slowly, "that there are things not written into policy that are still the right thing. Flexibility is one of them." Elise looked at Andy. "Are you suggesting we give up our assigned seats just to make it more convenient for someone else?" Andy didn't know what to say. Sweat gathered on his forehead. I thought, maybe you'd consider. She's a valued guest." "We're also valued," Jada said softly, "just not in her eyes." Elise turned to her sister. "Stay calm." "I am calm." Mrs. Prescott gripped her bag strap. "I'll speak with the manager." "Please do," Elise replied. "We have a few people to call as well." As she walked away, her heels tapped the floor like a verdict. Andy scurried behind. Elise and Jada looked at each other. "Guess what?" Jada whispered. "The moment." Elise nodded. "The moment." Jillian Prescott didn't believe in the word wait. In her world, everything had to be on time, in the right place, and handled by the right person. Everyone who served her knew the unspoken rules. Don't make her call twice, don't stare at her for too long, and never, under any circumstances, make her feel like any other passenger. For over 2 decades of flying with AuroraLink, she was always addressed as Madam, offered champagne without being asked, and had someone ready with a warm towel before she even raised her hand. Not because she demanded it, but because she was always presumed to be the kind of loyal elite customer that must never be disappointed. That's why, stepping out of her Range Rover this morning and having to pull her own suitcase through the Grand Hall, only to discover that a glitch in the seating system had accidentally separated her from her husband, who was safely settled in seat 1C while she was dumped in 9E, was nothing short of unacceptable. Not for someone like her, and certainly not on the day she was wearing her special crane-patterned Hermes silk scarf, the one she only wore on high-profile international trips. Andy, the young and obviously undertrained lounge attendant, was clearly unprepared for handling someone like her. From the moment she handed over her boarding pass, his eyes began to flutter. She didn't need to read his name tag. He had repeated it at least 3 times in under 2 minutes. "I'm Andy, Mrs. Prescott, and I'm very sorry, but..." But what? But the seats couldn't be changed? But a member who had spent over $200,000 a year couldn't be prioritized? But they couldn't do something as basic as ensuring she sat next to the man who had married her in 1986 and still refused to fly alone due to his fear of having a seizure midair? Ridiculous. Then she saw them, the 2 young women seated by the glass wall, neatly dressed, laptops open, green tea cooling on the table. But their skin tone, their hair, and the way they held themselves told her instantly. They weren't the kind of people who usually showed up in prestige class. Not by what she was used to, not within the system she had helped sustain through years of loyalty and spending. Some things didn't need to be said to be understood. She had seen their eyes when she walked in. Not defiant, not submissive, but the most dangerous kind of neutral. They thought they were equals. And that was what made her decide. If anyone was going to move, it would be them. As she approached, Andy was still stammering. The system's locked now. I think it's... She didn't listen. She had come far enough in life to know that systems serve people, not the other way around. And she was the kind of person who didn't ask. She informed. Standing before the sisters, she deliberately avoided direct eye contact. Her gaze hovered just below their brows, as if speaking to a pair of misplaced suitcases. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sweeter than usual. "I believe there's been a mistake." When her request was met with calm but firm refusal, she was taken aback, but didn't back down. People used to living through privileges rarely know how to accept rejection. So she pressed on, this time offering a reward with the request. Seat 9E was still in prestige class, with full meal service, and Andy could handle the voucher. Just a small courtesy, that's all. But when the younger one with the afro tilted her head and clearly said, "We chose these seats 4 months ago," she felt her blood heat up. Not because they were rude, they weren't, but because they weren't following the script. She glanced at Andy. He stood stuck between two very different choices. One longtime client with her name on the internal VIP roster, and two young women who might be startup founders, MBA students, or a pair of employees on a company-sponsored trip. He didn't know, but she did. And she couldn't accept being refused by someone she still, in her mind, placed on the lower tiers of the service pyramid. She turned away, stating, "I will speak to the manager." Elise's parting words. "We have someone to call too." That made her pause for a second, but she didn't look back. Someone like her didn't react to threats from below. She walked on, her heels tapping out a rhythm like a challenge. Andy rushed after her, a useless tale. At the reception desk at the far end of the lounge, an attendant was working on a tablet. She tapped gently on the counter. "Call the manager." Her voice wasn't loud, but the tone made the attendant immediately straighten and say, "I'll call Miss Monica." While waiting, she stood by the desk, spine upright, eyes steady, yet subtly scanning the room. 3 people glanced at her. One whispered something to their companion. Someone in the room had started to sense that something was happening, and that was exactly what she wanted. She wanted everyone around to remember that Jillian Prescott was not someone who could be refused without consequences. Monica Reyes stepped out from a door inside, her black hair tied neatly back, her lounge manager uniform pressed to perfection. "Good morning, Mrs. Prescott," she said calmly. "I'm Monica, the manager here. How can I assist you today?" "You can start by correcting an error," Jillian replied. "My husband and I always sit together on every train. Today, due to a system glitch, I was pushed to 9E, and the pair occupying 1A and 1B refused to switch. I don't know who they are, but clearly they don't understand how Aurora Link works." Monica listened without taking notes, without interrupting, but her expression began to shift as Jillian continued. "I know how PR works these days. The front seats always have some diversity representatives for the brochure photos, right? But I'm the one who's kept this airline alive through actual loyalty, not through optics." Meanwhile, Elise and Jada were still seated at the same table. They didn't look over, but Monica had seen enough to understand. She turned to Andy. "Seats 1A and 1B, who are they assigned to?" Andy opened the tablet, hands slightly trembling. "Elise Morrison and Jada Morrison. Payment confirmed. Booked since March." Monica nodded. "And Mrs. Prescott's seat?" 9E, Andy said. "Upgraded from 11C using platinum reward points." Monica turned to Jillian. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry today hasn't met your expectations, but I cannot move passengers with valid boarding passes from their seats without consent, and I believe they've already declined." Jillian gripped her bag strap tightly. "Are you protecting them because of how they look? Because they check some diversity box? You think I don't see that?" Monica took a deep breath. "I'm protecting the principle of fair service for all passengers." "Then I'll make a call," Jillian said, phone already in hand. "I'll call the regional business director. He's a friend of mine." Monica remained calm. "You are absolutely within your rights to do that, But I will also report this incident to the executive board. Jillian said nothing else. She turned and marched to a seat by the counter, her face blazing with the intensity of someone preparing for a counterattack. Andy stood frozen, unsure whether to stay or go. Monica returned to the reception desk, and no one noticed that at the table near the window, Jada had already pulled out her phone. She wasn't recording. She wasn't taking photos. She simply stared at the screen, tapped a familiar number, and waited. Elise noticed her sister placing her phone on the table with an eerie calm. No haste, no display, not even a sigh. Just a simple motion, almost signal-free. But Elise immediately sensed it. Something had shifted. Jada stared straight at the reception desk, where Monica and Jillian Prescott had just finished a conversation that clearly led to no compromise. No one had to say it aloud. The atmosphere in the lounge now felt like a still lake disturbed by a stone. The ripple wasn't loud, but it was spreading. Elise said nothing. She picked up her cold tea and set it back onto the saucer. A soft clink rang out, barely noticeable. But in this room, even that was enough to make a few heads lift slightly. At the front desk, Monica returned with a tablet in hand. She had just finished filing an internal report on the incident. At that moment, Andy stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Ms. Monica, Mrs. Prescott, wants to speak with you again." Monica didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Elise and Jada. Elise's face was unreadable, but Monica could feel the fatigue behind their patience. She nodded and walked back toward Jillian. Mrs. Prescott was seated, legs crossed, her phone resting in her palm like a detonator. Monica approached, maintaining a composed yet firm expression. "Yes, ma'am?" Jillian looked up, her eyes no longer calm but laced with irritation. "I just spoke to someone at headquarters. They confirmed I can be prioritized for a front row seat." Monica didn't flinch. "I'm afraid even headquarters cannot reassign another passenger's seat without their consent." Jillian let out a soft, bitter laugh. "Then you won't mind if I make the offer to them myself?" Monica paused. "You may do what you believe is appropriate." Jillian stood up, adjusted her scarf, and walked toward Elise and Jada without any formal preamble, as though approaching an object to be managed. Elise looked up first. Jada remained focused on her tablet. "I'm sorry," Jillian said, her voice pitched higher than usual, trying to sound gentle but reeking of manipulation. "But I still believe this is just a misunderstanding. Surely you two can understand my situation." Elise kept her gaze steady. "We understood when you first approached, and when you explained, but we cannot switch seats." Jillian smiled. "I don't want to be a bother. I just thought, if you could take another spot, you're still going to Vancouver after all." "And you're still going to Vancouver," Jada replied, not looking up. "The difference is you want something that doesn't belong to you." Jillian softened her tone, trying to appeal. "I understand, but I've been a platinum member for over 15 years. I always fly prestige. I'm not used to being separated from my husband. And we're not used to being asked to give up our rights because someone else is used to comfort," Elise said. A few people in the room began to notice. An elderly couple in the far corner stared openly. A lounge staff member approached the coffee counter but said nothing. Jillian looked around, then lowered her voice, though still loud enough to be overheard. "I think you're blowing this out of proportion. In the end, it's just a seat." That sentence made Jada snap her tablet shut. She turned fully, her eyes cold and sharp. "Just a seat? A seat we selected, paid for, and planned around since March? A seat we need to work to prepare for a presentation we've spent a year building? Or are you saying that because we don't look like front row people, this seat doesn't belong to us?" Jillian looked stunned for a moment. Elise jumped in, her voice even. "We haven't insulted you. We haven't raised our voices. We've only said no, and saying no doesn't make us wrong." Jillian squinted. "I see now. This is about identity, isn't it? About that so-called right to be seen? About diversity." Jada clenched her fist. Elise gently touched her sister's hand. "You're the one making it a big issue," Elise said. "We just want to sit where we're supposed to." Jillian stood still for a moment, then turned and walked away. Elise and Jada didn't watch her go, but they knew the storm wasn't over. 15 minutes later, Monica returned with another woman, dressed in a tailored suit, short hair, name tag reading, Customer Experience Regional Lead. She approached their table with a polite smile. I'm Rachel from Executive Response. I wanted to thank you both for your patience. I understand there's been some confusion regarding today's experience. Elise replied, not confusion, just a request that was declined. Rachel nodded. I understand, and I just want to confirm that we respect your decision. No passenger is ever forced to move without consent. However, we would like to offer additional vouchers as a goodwill gesture. Jada shook her head. We don't need vouchers. We just want to be treated like regular passengers. Rachel looked briefly unsettled. I understand. Elise added softly, thank you for the formal confirmation. We hope this doesn't happen again. Rachel stepped away, but it wasn't over. A man in business attire approached, whispered something into Rachel's ear. Her expression grew more serious. Monica followed closely behind. Rachel spoke quietly. There's a call from the executive office. They want to speak directly with Ms. Monica, and apparently with passenger Prescott. Elise glanced at Jada. She nodded. Here we go. Monica Reyes entered the lounge in perfectly polished black shoes and a management badge neatly pinned to her chest. She was no stranger to the complexities of luxury spaces, places where the lighting was soft, the leather chairs cost more than a month's rent, and the champagne was never poured more than halfway up the glass. As the only Latina woman on Aurora Link's management team at the Seattle terminal, Monica was acutely aware that she existed simultaneously as a symbol of diversity on someone's quarterly report, and as someone who was never allowed to make a mistake. She couldn't raise her voice, couldn't lose composure, couldn't let emotion override logic, and she definitely couldn't let a lounge incident spiral upward to corporate leadership. But today, when she was summoned over a sensitive situation in VIP Zone A, Monica felt something was off. At the front desk, a staffer named Luis leaned in and whispered as she arrived, "You might want to be careful. Sounds like a discrimination issue." Monica nodded, thanked him, and walked toward the seats by the glass wall where three women sat, two black and one older white woman in a beige blazer. Monica recognized the older woman immediately as Jillian Farrow, one of the real estate investors Aurora Link had once hosted at the launch of the Seattle-Portland Express route. Jillian had a complicated history. She'd once emailed a complaint about being served by too many non-native English speakers in the lounge the year before. The younger black woman sitting closest to the wall was unfamiliar to Monica, but her eyes, calm, observant, made Monica instinctively tread more carefully. She approached with a professional smile. "Good morning. I'm Monica Reyes, lounge manager here at the Seattle terminal. I was informed there may be a concern requiring assistance." Jillian didn't wait for the question. She immediately leaned back in her seat, ran a hand through her hair, and spoke with a challenging tone. "I'm only saying what everyone already knows. This is an elite space. It's not a place for PR stunts about diversity or inclusion." Elise Morrison, seated beside her, remained silent. Jada glanced over, her head tilting slightly as if preparing to respond. But Elise placed a hand gently on hers, a silent gesture meaning, "Don't." Jillian went on, louder now, seemingly aware that Monica was listening. "I know exactly how this system works. Diversity, inclusion, appearances, it's all PR, a game for the cameras. But we all know who actually belongs in these seats." Monica stood motionless, her face neutral, but inside a tide of controlled fury and calculation stirred. These weren't new words to her. She'd heard their variations for years, and she knew that if she responded too quickly, Jillian would twist the narrative into a Latina manager attacking a valued guest. She turned to Elise and Jada. "I'm sorry if anything has made you uncomfortable. We will ensure that all our guests are respected and supported." Elise didn't smile. She gave a small nod, but her eyes locked with Monica's in a quiet, unwavering question. "Whose side are you on?" Monica turned back, signaling Luis to reopen the camera system for Zone A. She needed time, but deep down, she knew her decision would have to come soon. She couldn't ignore this, but she also couldn't break protocol. Monica returned, this time with a tablet in hand. "I'd like to re-verify your seat assignments to ensure there's no error." Jillian scoffed. "Oh, you should probably double-check theirs. I'm sure I'm in the right spot." Elise handed over a digital passenger card. the kind reserved for priority gold charter members, only issued to individuals who had invested at least $1 million into the Aurora Link network. Monica scanned it. The name popped up. Elise Morrison. Status, active charter. Seat, Zone A, Seat 3. Monica looked up. She knew it was time to say the right thing, not the safe thing. She spoke slowly. Everything is valid. There's no error. Jillian narrowed her eyes at Monica, then let out a condescending laugh. Of course. Even you have to say that now. Monica drew a breath. She set the tablet on a nearby table. Her eyes no longer held the reflexive politeness of a manager trying to keep everyone happy. Now they belonged to someone facing a truth she refused to bend. Ms. Farrow, she said, we do not tolerate discriminatory statements in this lounge. That's not just policy. It's a matter of ethics. Jillian frowned. Are you accusing me of something? Monica didn't blink. I'm protecting the integrity of this space. Elise nodded slightly. Not out of approval, but because, finally, there was action. Jillian looked like she wanted to argue, but Monica raised a hand gently. If you'd like to continue using our lounge, I ask that your language remain respectful. Jillian bit her lip, pulling her hand away. She said nothing more. Not because she was convinced, but because she knew she was being watched. Monica turned to Elise and Jada. I deeply regret this incident. We're currently updating our code of conduct for VIP passengers, and I'd like to invite you both to join a private dialogue next week, if you're available. Elise gave a small nod. Not a commitment, but her gaze had softened. Monica walked away, but she knew, at that moment, she was no longer the one in the middle. She had chosen. As Monica stepped away, the air in the lounge settled like a lake gently stirred. Jillian Farrow remained seated, arms crossed, her expression stiff as she clung to a composure that now flickered with visible unease. Elise leaned back in her seat, legs crossed, though the faint crease between her brows betrayed the tension she held. Jada, seated beside her, had barely spoken, but her eyes kept drifting toward the center table. In her hand was her smartphone, black, unadorned, with a chipped corner on the right that hinted at constant use. Elise placed her hand gently over Jada's, not in a dramatic gesture, but with a familiarity only sisters would understand. Jada glanced down at her phone, then said quietly, almost inaudibly, as if only for Elise, maybe we should let someone else handle this. Elise tilted her head slightly but didn't ask. She already knew who Jada meant. Jada opened her contacts and tapped on a single entry labeled simply, Dad. No surname, no title, just Dad. She hit call, placed the phone flat on the table, and switched to speaker mode. Jillian looked up, squinting slightly, sensing that something was about to happen but not quite grasping what. A soft ringing filled the lounge. Then a deep, steady voice came through instantly. Jada, Elise, everything okay? Just those 3 words and the energy in the lounge shifted. Elise didn't answer. Jada replied gently, We're in the lounge at Seattle Central. There was a situation. Define situation, the voice replied. Not angry, just direct. The kind of question that left no room for the wrong answer. Elise spoke carefully. Someone made a comment, a public one, about diversity being just PR. Silence. Then the voice asked, Are you okay? Jada nodded instinctively, though the man couldn't see. We're fine. Just tired of the assumptions. Jillian now appeared genuinely unsettled. She cleared her throat and spoke with regained superiority. Excuse me, but is this a call I should be hearing? Elise turned to her, her eyes no longer soft. Yes, I think you should. Jillian furrowed her brow, opening her mouth to speak, but Jada raised her hand, not to silence, but as a quiet full stop. Then the voice from the phone returned, louder now, likely transferred to the integrated audio system. This is Kenneth Morrison speaking. Jillian blinked. Elise didn't react, but Monica, walking past the nearby area, stopped in her tracks. She had heard that name hundreds of times in internal memos, board meetings, and market bulletins. Kenneth Morrison, current CEO and co-founder of Morrison & Hart, the strategic investment firm that had quietly acquired 51% controlling interest in Aurora Link just 2 weeks ago. The acquisition had been low profile, with most middle management still unaware of the ownership shift. But Monica, as senior lounge manager, had reviewed the ownership sensitivity protocol, a document listing stakeholders whose family members and associates must never be disrespected. Kenneth Morrison topped that list, and now he was speaking live, on speakerphone, from who knows where. Perhaps his office on the 51st floor in Boston, or a private car on the northbound express route. Kenneth continued, "I need you to let Monica Reyes know I'll be arriving in Seattle tomorrow morning." Jillian swallowed. She turned to Monica, who was now calmly approaching, with an expression of disbelief. Monica gave a polite, practiced nod, as if accustomed to such power plays erupting within her lounge. Elise added, her tone more of a public notice than a warning. "You might also want to inform the board that the incident involved an active charter investor and his daughters." Jillian stammered. "You're... what?" Jada offered a soft smile. Not smug, just enough for Jillian to grasp that the power dynamic had shifted long before she knew a game had started. "We're not guests, Mrs. Farrow. We're stakeholders." Monica said nothing, but in her mind, she was already calculating how fast this situation would spread. A call from Kenneth Morrison, live in public, would undoubtedly be logged in the internal system and circulate like wildfire through the regional leadership groups. Jillian froze, her eyes cast downward. She knew she had no one left to call. No PR handler could salvage a first impression this poorly misjudged, especially when the person offended was the daughter of the primary shareholder. Monica turned slightly toward the speakerphone. "Mr. Morrison, this is Monica Reyes. I deeply apologize for what happened. We will file a full report and—" Kenneth interrupted, his voice gentle but ironclad. "I'm not looking for a report. I'm looking for clarity. Clarity on how we welcome the people who built this." No one in the room dared breathe aloud. Elise glanced at Jada, and in that instant, all the silence, discomfort, and quiet indignities from the last 4 chapters felt like they had been swept away by that single word: clarity. Kenneth Morrison didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He only spoke with measured gravity. And with that, the conversation had ended long before Jillian had the chance to choose a side. Monica bowed her head slightly. "Understood, sir." Jillian rose, clutching her bag. But no one signaled for her to leave. No one had to. She understood now. She should. Elise and Jada remained seated, not out of pride, but because they had no reason to move. As Monica walked away, she unlocked her internal device and began drafting an email. Subject: Lounge Protocol Review, urgent. The phone lay still on the table, its screen glowing with a single word: Dad. Monica stood upright, her eyes fixed on the device still on speaker. For a few seconds, it was as if the entire lounge had been drained of sound. Elise and Jada remained seated, but their expressions had completely changed. No longer defensive, no longer composed out of necessity. They didn't need to be. Kenneth Morrison's voice, steady as ever, now carried the tone of someone chairing a board meeting. But this time, he didn't need many words to own the entire room. "Ms. Reyes," he said firmly, "I just heard a lounge employee offer to downgrade my daughters from seats they paid for and allow an entitled woman to use her prejudice as a passport." Monica stood frozen. She knew instantly that those words weren't just personal outrage. They were executive language. The phrase, "use her prejudice as a passport," wasn't just sharp. It was destined to become the title of an internal training slide within the next 6 months. And everyone in this room, willingly or not, had just become a case study. Jillian Farrow remained standing nearby, her posture shifting from bewildered to visibly shaken. Elise didn't look at her. Her eyes were now focused on Monica again. That same quiet question lingered in her gaze. "Whose side are you on?" Kenneth didn't wait for answers. He continued, "I am issuing 3 immediate directives." Monica's breath caught. Her mind raced through possibilities. What came next surpassed even her expectations. "First," Kenneth said, "cancel Mrs. Jillian Farrow's ticket. Immediately." Jillian staggered back half a step. "What? You can't?" Monica raised her hand, not to silence her, but to acknowledge receipt. She tapped her wrist device. A holographic booking interface appeared, and within moments, she located Jillian's reservation using her membership ID. With two quick confirmations, the screen flashed. Booking canceled. No clarification needed. No approvals required. Elise said nothing, but a faint release of tension twitched at the corner of her mouth, like letting go of something she'd held for far too long. Kenneth went on. Second, revoke her membership privileges. Permanently. I won't have my company associated with someone who degrades others under the guise of elitism. Monica followed through. The system blinked a final warning. Are you sure you want to proceed with member status revocation? She hit yes. Jillian, now stripped of all leverage, scanned the room, looking for anyone who might save her, but no one did. Guests in the lounge began murmuring. A man in the far corner shook his head, clearly having caught most of the conversation. A woman nearby leaned to whisper something to her companion, eyes filled with quiet sympathy, but not for Jillian. Jada remained composed. Her eyes didn't gloat. They didn't waver. They simply held the calm of someone who knew that truth had finally caught up. Kenneth paused, his voice dipping slightly. Lower, slower, but no less commanding. Third, he said, I want Ms. Monica Reyes and your regional supervisor, Andy Tran, correct, to report to Morrison plus Hart headquarters tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. I expect a full situational review. Monica nodded before her brain could fully process. Andy, she remembered. They'd attended an executive management course together 2 years ago. Andy was diligent, but conflict-averse. He wouldn't like this. But the word expect coming from Kenneth Morrison wasn't a suggestion. It was an executive order. Elise spoke for the first time since the call began. Her voice was soft but clear. Thank you, Dad. Kenneth responded instantly. You two should have never been put in that position. This system we bought into, it's going to change. Then the call ended. No pleasantries. No closing statement. Just a decisive click and a blank screen. And yet the silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before. Kenneth Morrison was no longer in the room, but his presence lingered. Monica stood still for a long moment. She looked at Elise, then Jada, then finally at Jillian, now holding her bag, her face pale and silent. Mrs. Farrow, Monica said, her voice low but firm, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the lounge immediately. Jillian opened her mouth but said nothing. Her heels clicked hastily across the wooden floor as she exited. No one saw her off. Elise turned to Monica and with a calm, almost kind voice said, This wasn't your fault, but how you respond, that's your legacy. Monica nodded. She knew she had just stood between two opposing forces. One, the fading embodiment of an old-world power, Jillian, and the other, Elise and Jada, the holders of a new value system reshaping Aurora Link through Morrison plus Hart. Without being told, she understood. This was no longer about seating, it was about standing. Standing for something, standing with someone, and knowing where you stand in a company being quietly but decisively transformed. She tapped open her device again and logged into the internal system. Under the lounge operations menu, she created a new entry, Incident Response, Category A. Not because this was the loudest dispute she'd ever handled, but because it was the first time a father, as an owner, defended his daughters not through anger, but by redefining an entire system. Elise stood up and gently pulled her handbag from beside her feet. Jada followed. Neither of them moved quickly. Neither needed to leave. But they knew. They were no longer on the receiving end of anything. Monica walked beside them out of the lounge, not as an escort, but as a silent apology. On the main screen above the front desk, an internal ticker updated, Investor Notice, Ownership Restructure in Progress, Morrison plus Hart. Elise glanced up and smiled, not at the message, but at what it truly meant. Structure isn't just about who holds shares. It's about who has the courage to reshape how people are seen. And today it had started with a phone call, a name, a voice, and 3 sentences that changed everything. Jillian Farrow did not leave quietly. The moment Monica Reyes announced that her ticket had been canceled and her lounge access revoked, the room seemed to hold its breath. But the silence didn't last long. Jillian erupted, not in fury, but with what she firmly believed was righteous indignation. This is discrimination, she declared, her voice rising. This is reverse racism. I'm being treated like a criminal in my own country. She looked around, scanning the room for support, for a nod, a glance, an ally. But no one moved. The silence was louder than any shout. A woman in a gray dress gently placed her phone face down on the table. A startup-type man in sneakers shifted his seat away, avoiding eye contact. An elderly man with silver hair sipped his espresso, his hand perfectly still. No one stood with Jillian. And that, more than Monica's words or Kenneth Morrison's call, seemed to disorient her. "You people think you're so virtuous, don't you?" She spat at Monica. "You bow to political correctness and turn me into the villain for asking a simple question?" Monica didn't flinch. Her voice remained steady. "It wasn't a question. It was a judgment. And you said it loud and clear." Jillian's face flushed. "You don't even know who I am." "I don't need to," Monica replied, firm. "But you've made it very clear who you think other people are." For a moment, it looked as though Jillian might hurl her designer bag across the room, but instead she gathered her things dramatically, clutching her purse like a shield, and stormed toward the exit. As she passed the other guests, she muttered words like witch hunt, lawsuit, and cancel culture. Still, no one intervened. A security staff member in a sharp black suit approached, not touching her, just motioning quietly. Jillian flipped her hair back and delivered a parting shot like venom. "Hope you all enjoyed the show, because that's all this is. Theater?" And then she was gone. The glass door shut behind her with the faintest hiss, like an exhausted sigh. Silence returned. This time it stayed. Jada was the first to break it, not with words but by placing her phone face down on the table. Monica turned back toward the room. Her eyes swept across the space, not just landing on Elise and Jada, but on everyone. "For clarity," she said clearly, "privilege is not a reason, and prejudice is not a policy." She dipped her head slightly, a quiet punctuation mark, then turned toward the back hallway, needing a moment away from the weight of 100 watching eyes. Elise and Jada didn't say anything immediately. They didn't gloat. They didn't smirk. They didn't even glance at each other. Elise lifted her cold coffee, took a sip, and exhaled slowly. Jada leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her face unreadable. "I didn't think it would end like that," Jada said eventually. Elise tilted her head. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. I thought she'd win again. And we'd just let it go." Elise nodded. "We've let it go too many times." "Yeah." They sat in that silence for a while. The espresso machine hummed faintly in the corner. Someone typed gently on a keyboard. The room blinked and moved on. But Jada hadn't. "Did you see Monica's face?" she asked softly. Elise looked up. "When?" "When she said it. The line about privilege and policy. She wasn't just saying it to Jillian." Elise nodded. "I know." In the back office, Monica sat quietly in a chair, her employee badge dangling sideways from her blazer. She didn't open emails, didn't make a call. She just stared at a photograph on the wall. Aurora Link's original launch ceremony, back when there were only 3 rail lines and dreams bigger than funding. She remembered her first week on the job being told, "Never cause trouble with platinum members." She had practiced diplomacy like a dance. But tonight wasn't a performance. It was necessary, and it was overdue. A soft knock came at the doorframe. Elise stood there, hands in her jacket pockets. "May I?" Monica nodded. "Please." Elise sat. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Elise said, "I wanted to thank you for what you did out there." Monica gave a tired smile. "I didn't do it to be thanked." "I know. That's why it mattered." Monica looked down at her hands. "This job, it teaches you a lot about who gets to be comfortable, who gets assumed to belong, and who has to prove it." Elise dipped her head. "You just changed that." Monica sighed. "Just for tonight." Elise smiled. "That's how all change starts." They sat in that stillness, a quieter, kinder kind of silence. That evening, after the lounge closed and the last train departed, Monica stayed late to finish her report. She walked through the now empty waiting area, lights dimming behind her row by row. She paused at the chair where Jillian had sat. It was neatly aligned, the cushion untouched. But it felt different, not sullied, cleansed. She adjusted the menu, realigned the coaster, and continued toward the rear exit. Driving home through Seattle's quiet streets, the dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened, not out of anxiety, but from the adrenaline that hadn't fully faded. She replayed the moment, Jillian's voice, the room's stillness, the words she had chosen. Had she gone too far? Had it been enough? Yellow lights blinked at empty intersections. She rolled the window down a notch, hoping the wind might carry away whatever pressure remained. She didn't feel brave. Most days she was just trying to do her job well. But tonight she had crossed a line. Not the kind in policy manuals, a moral one. And whatever came next, she knew she couldn't go back to who she was before. At home, she took off her shoes, fed her dog Milo, and stood in the kitchen eating cold soup straight from the container. Her inbox pinged. She opened her laptop. Among dozens of unread emails was one flagged urgent from corporate communications. Subject line, internal response and media strategy, immediate action required. Her chest tightened, but the content wasn't criticism. It was praise, measured, corporate, but affirming. There would be an internal review of lounge procedures. Her name had been cited by 2 passengers as a key factor in appropriately handling a racially biased incident. The final line simply read, prepare for potential media inquiries. Do not comment until official statement is released. She closed the laptop. Outside her window, a train rushed by in the distance. The next morning, Monica arrived at Morrison plus Hart headquarters 20 minutes early. She wore a navy suit, brought no documents. She hadn't come to defend herself. She had come to tell the truth, and to see what kind of company she now worked for. In the elevator, she caught her reflection. Not the tired face from last night, a steadier one, maybe stronger. On the 27th floor, there was no receptionist, only Kenneth Morrison. He shook her hand warmly. Ms. Reyes, he said, before we begin, I want to thank you for showing us what frontline leadership really looks like. She didn't know what to say. She nodded. In the corner of the meeting room sat a tray of coffee and a vase of white orchids. Elise and Jada were already at the table. They looked at her, not as strangers, not as VIPs. Just present. Kenneth gestured for her to sit. Let's talk about what happens when a company stops making excuses and starts setting standards. Monica sat down, recalling her own words from the night before. Privilege is not a reason. Prejudice is not a policy. Now, it wasn't just a statement, it was a door. And today that door had opened. Not just for her, but for everything that came next. Monica stepped out of the elevator on the 42nd floor of Morrison plus Hart headquarters, feeling like she had just walked into an internal tribunal. There was no judge, no gavel, no official court, yet the atmosphere inside the conference room made one thing clear. It was time to confront what had happened. Andy sat beside her, clutching the hem of his blazer, his face tense and pale. Across the table sat Devin Langston, Chief Operating Officer, known company-wide for his precision and emotionally detached decision-making. Behind him on a large screen, a sequence of security camera clips played in silence. Jada and Elise entering the lounge. Jillian raising her voice, Monica pausing in hesitation, and finally Monica bowing slightly as she took the call from Kenneth Morrison. No narration, no edits, just truth, presented plainly. Devin tapped pause. He looked at Monica, his voice not raised but sharpened by gravity. We didn't summon you here to assign blame. We need to understand. What made someone like you, with all your experience and judgment, hesitate in the face of something so clearly wrong? Monica took a deep breath. Because I wasn't sure the system would back me if I chose what was right. The room held its breath. Devin said nothing. He nodded to his assistant, who brought up a new slide. Customer complaint data from the past 3 years at Aurora Link lounges, most of which had nothing to do with food, cleanliness, or amenities, but centered around how staff responded to passengers who didn't fit the default image of a VIP. Devin stood. This is no longer a personnel issue. This is systemic rot, a culture of one-way service, where customers are assessed by shoe brands, skin tones, and fluency in English. It didn't start with Monica, and it won't end with Andy. It's in the job descriptions, the training manuals, the sideways glances we've never dared to name for what they are: prejudice. After the meeting, Monica was given a new assignment: to rebuild Aurora Link's national service standard from the ground up. She was authorized to propose, pilot, and launch a training program with no precedent. Andy, meanwhile, was reassigned, not fired, but invited to a probationary retraining program at Morrison Land, a logistics subsidiary, where he'd relearn respect, responsibility, and the importance of small actions. As Monica passed by his desk while he packed up, they didn't speak, but Andy looked up, surprised, and bowed his head slightly. In the following week, Monica began intensive sessions with a newly formed advisory team. She didn't draft protocols in legal language. She began with questions. Who is the least seen person in our lounges? Why do we tolerate an unspoken definition of what a suitable customer looks like? How do we empower employees to make the right call, even when policy doesn't? She brought in behavioral experts, not to draw up flowcharts, but to help staff understand that tone, eye contact, and a pause before speaking are just as powerful as any script. She proposed a 30-day pilot called the Respect Protocol, requiring every employee, from check-in agents to lounge attendants, to rotate through VIP, economy, and accessibility service zones, regardless of rank or role. In week 2 of the pilot, Monica paid a surprise visit to Concordia Station, one of the busiest hubs. There she witnessed something that made her stop mid-step. A young staffer named Myra was patiently guiding an elderly woman through a self-check-in kiosk, using only facial expressions and gestures. The woman didn't speak English. Myra hadn't been told to help. No one was supervising. She just noticed the woman was lost and acted. Monica walked up and asked gently, "Where did you learn to do that?" Myra smiled. "My mom. She used to get lost in subway stations." In week 3, Monica received an email from Andy. It wasn't long. It didn't explain. It simply read, "I never realized I used to speak to people like they had to earn the right to be respected. Thank you for giving me the chance to unlearn." Monica didn't reply. She printed it out and pinned it to her desk. In week 4, the company held a system-wide town hall, the first to include equal representation from janitorial staff, technicians, front desk workers, and mid-level managers. Monica stepped onto the stage and didn't read a report. She simply asked one question. Have you ever looked at someone and thought they didn't belong here, just because they didn't match your image of success? The room was silent. Then a long-serving manager raised his hand. I did, and I thought it was professionalism. Monica nodded. We don't need to be ashamed. We just need to be brave enough to see it. At the end of the session, Monica handed each attendee a small card. One side showed an empty seat labeled 1A. The other read, "Respect is not a favor. It's a foundation." She didn't require anyone to wear it. She didn't ask them to keep it. But a week later, nearly every employee across the system had pinned that card to their uniform, a quiet, self-chosen pledge. 2 days after receiving a thank you gift from Elise and Jada, Monica returned to Seattle Central Station, the place where it all began. She wore no management badge. She brought no entourage. It was an unannounced visit. She walked past the lounge and noticed the new front desk attendant helping an elderly Korean woman with broken English. No one rushed her. No one brushed her off. Monica stood nearby for nearly 3 minutes, not to audit, but to breathe. Then she moved on to the boarding gates, pausing in the crowded economy waiting area. Still noisy, still chaotic, but in her eyes something subtle had changed. A little girl, maybe 10, in a red plaid dress, sat sketching in a notebook. Curious, Monica crouched beside her and asked, "What are you drawing?" The girl looked up and smiled. "I'm drawing the nice people I met today. That lady," she pointed at a cleaner collecting trash, "smiled at me. That man over there showed me how to scan my ticket. I think they should be in my journal." Monica chuckled. "Do you think I should be in the picture?" The girl tilted her head. "Did you do something kind today?" Monica was quiet, then nodded. "I'm trying." That evening, Monica returned home and placed the girl's sketchbook beside her respect protocol folder. She didn't need to keep it, but she wanted to remember. Change doesn't come from speeches or senior titles or performance metrics. It comes from an unnecessary smile, a deliberate pause, a single moment transformed by kindness. The next morning, she sent one final internal email before stepping down from the protocol leadership role. We'll never fully know what we've changed. But if even one person walks into Aurora Link and no longer feels like they have to prove they belong, then we've already won. The story didn't end with Monica getting promoted. She turned down an offer to become National Vice President of Customer Experience. She asked instead to return to Seattle Station, her original post, where she could stand at the boarding gate each day and greet every traveler with, "Welcome aboard." And so, from an unjust request in a luxury lounge, from a doubted seat 1A, from a child's sketchbook honoring kindness, Aurora Link didn't just run faster. It began to reach deeper, into the people it carried and the people who carried it. Harold Prescott stepped out of the office building of Prescott and Smith LLP with a heavier gait than any Monday morning in his 22-year career as a senior attorney. In his hand was a tightly sealed envelope, labeled in bold, "Confidential for immediate review." He was used to documents like this, but this time it had been sent directly to him by a long-standing client. Morrison plus Hart. Inside the elevator, Harold used his key card to access the executive floor. The office was as quiet as any Monday morning, but when he entered the conference room, the three other founding partners, Catherine Smith, Jonah Reeves, and David Klein, were already seated, saying nothing. On the large screen at the head of the table was the Morrison plus Hart logo with a newly displayed email line. As discussed in our legal agreement, Clause 17, Reputation Risk Management, Section 4.3, Termination without notice. Harold hadn't even sat down when Catherine broke the silence. "Harold," she said, her tone calm to the point of coldness, "Morrison plus Hart sent us the transcript, along with video footage, and a formal letter stating that your wife, Jillian Prescott's conduct at the Aurora Link terminal violated the ethics clause of our $12 million annual contract." Harold said nothing. He hadn't even processed it yet. Catherine handed him the packet. Inside were transcripts of Jillian's exchange with Elise and Jada in the lounge. Every prejudiced comment, every moment captured by security footage, marked in red. Catherine continued, "They've declared they will terminate the entire legal counsel agreement, effective immediately, and they'll release a public statement within 48 hours if we don't respond." Harold raised his hand to his forehead. Cold sweat began trickling down his back. "We discussed this before you arrived," David Klein said firmly, "and we reached consensus. Keeping Harold Prescott on the executive board is no longer viable. To protect the firm's reputation, you must step down." No vote was taken, no debate was needed. Harold nodded. He understood the law, and this time, the law was not on his side. 2 hours later, Harold returned to his home, a sprawling estate in northern Seattle, nestled among pine trees. Jillian was in the kitchen making tea, as if unaware of the approaching storm. He placed the folder on the table, removed his tie, and sat across from her. "Do you know what just happened?" His voice wasn't angry. It was almost hollow. Jillian turned, her manner unchanged. "If this is about that situation at the terminal," she shrugged, "I've explained it. They're overreacting. I simply responded to blatant favoritism. Those girls didn't look like first-class passengers." Harold cut in, his eyes starting to flash. "You cost us a $12 million contract. You got me removed from the board. You've destroyed the reputation I built over 3 decades in law." Jillian stood still, one hand resting on the chair. "All over a seat, because you couldn't accept that no one cares who you think belongs and who doesn't." He paused. "You didn't lose a seat. You lost everything." Jillian fell silent. After a while, she spoke softly. "So now you're taking their side. The whole world's against me." Harold looked at her one last time, not with hatred, but with a heavy sadness. "No one's against you, Jillian. They're just not silent anymore." He stood up, grabbed his bag, and left the house. The door closed behind him like a period at the end of a chapter. In the following weeks, Morrison plus Hart released a public report titled, "The Lounge Incident: What We Learned." Though it never mentioned Jillian by name, the details were unmistakable. A major section of the report focused on how social privilege can disguise itself as reasonable concern, and the consequences of that in public service spaces. Media experts, attorneys, and academics analyzed the event as a cultural inflection point. CNN dubbed it a lesson in reverse accountability, Meanwhile, The Atlantic published a long-form article titled, "Impartiality is a myth if it silences the marginalized." Jillian, now having left Seattle, moved in with her sister in Vermont. She stayed away from the press and declined all interview requests. Some sources claimed she was writing a book. Others speculated she was planning to sue Morrison plus Hart for reputational damage. But no legal action ever surfaced. Perhaps she realized this wasn't a story she could win. Harold, now living in a modest downtown apartment, began teaching evening law classes at a local university. During one lecture, a student asked him, "You handled some of the biggest lawsuits. What was your greatest failure?" Harold paused for a few seconds, then answered, "Not seeing what I needed to see, because it was too close to me to recognize." Across town, Elise and Jada continued their work at Morrison plus Hart, now frequently invited to speak at service equity seminars. Monica Reyes, the lounge manager, was appointed to lead the development of a company-wide equitable service training program for AuroraLink. At a student policy roundtable, Monica was asked, "Do you regret not stepping in sooner?" She smiled. "Had I not hesitated, maybe it wouldn't have exploded. But had I not reflected afterward, maybe it never would have ended." The final page of the Lounge Incident Report concluded with a single line. "A seat doesn't define a person, but how we defend it just might." The Vancouver Convention Center glowed under crisp autumn light. The annual summit, titled Next Horizons, Innovation, Equity, and the Future, had drawn more than 2,000 delegates from over 30 countries. All eyes in the hall were fixed on the massive screen, where a bold phrase appeared in crisp white font on a deep black background. "Tomorrow doesn't care what you look like, just what you build." Beside it was a striking image of two young women sitting side by side in seats 1A and 1B of the AuroraLink first-class train. Light fell across their faces, revealing poise, resolve, and undeniable confidence. Elise and Jada walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The months of perseverance, through doubt, assumptions, and bias, had brought them here, not as passengers once questioned for their right to sit in elite spaces, but as symbols of transformation and equity. Elise began the speech with a voice that was calm but resonant with meaning. "We used to think staying quiet was the best way to avoid trouble, but silence only cost us our seat, both literally and figuratively. We're here not just to affirm our worth, but to change how the world sees value in people." Jada picked up where her sister left off, her eyes radiant with conviction. "We're not asking for privilege. We're asking for recognition, based on real effort and real capability. When we bought those first-class tickets, we never imagined it would make someone angry. But someone else's discomfort isn't the fault of our existence." The hall erupted with applause. Some attendees stood, cheering not only for the sisters' personal journey, but for the ideals they now embodied: resilience, equality, and social progress. In a surprise announcement, conference organizers revealed that Elise and Jada had been named two of the 5 founding members of the Minority Enterprise Advancement Council, a fund sponsored by AuroraLink and 3 major tech firms. The council's mission: to support minority-led startups in transportation, healthcare, and green energy. The announcement set off a fresh wave of applause. Elise, eyes glistening with emotion but posture steady, said, "One train ticket didn't just change our lives. It changed the way society looks at people like us." Jada smiled, her voice steady and full of trust. "We want to help build a world where everyone is recognized, not for their color, background, or looks, but for what they contribute and create." At a small railway station on the outskirts of Portland, Gillian Prescott stepped off the train. Her eyes drifted unconsciously toward a newly installed series of posters. One made her stop. It featured Elise and Jada, bathed in radiant light, a beacon of a new generation. Beneath the photo was a bold line: "This seat was earned." Gillian stood motionless, as if searching for a place in the world that had moved past her. No one turned to look. No admiring glances followed her. She walked slowly, her figure now tired, stripped of the confidence and glamour that once cloaked her. The old world had closed, and all she had left was the silence in her own shadowed room. Back at AuroraLink headquarters, Monica Reyes worked tirelessly, refining the new equitable service training program down to the smallest detail. She knew systemic change wasn't instant, but each piece of positive feedback from staff and passengers fueled her conviction. We're not just building a system, she shared. We're building a community where people are heard and respected. Harold Prescott, Gillian's husband, had stepped away from high-powered legal work. He now served as a legal advisor for a nonprofit social justice project and taught law to young students. In one of his classes, a student asked, "You once led major legal battles. What was your biggest failure?" Harold paused, then answered, "Believing neutrality was enough. If you stand beside injustice and say nothing, you've chosen its side." Today, Harold speaks about civic duty and the law's role in protecting equity and conscience. Gillian lived reclusively in Colorado Springs, far from the spotlight and social circles she once thrived in. No longer part of elite clubs, she was now a solitary figure in a modest home. One day, flipping through a magazine, she came across another image of Elise and Jada. Her gaze didn't flash with anger this time, but rested there in silence, acknowledging perhaps what she had refused to see before. She folded the magazine, sipped her tea, and stared out the window. Tiny sparrows fluttered across the snow-covered yard. The world kept turning, and she was no longer part of its rhythm. Aurora Link launched the media campaign The Seat You Earned with strategic videos, articles, and community events aimed at elevating awareness around equity and service. Monica and her team closely oversaw each step, turning Elise and Jada's story into a national symbol. Across Aurora Link branches, the new training programs rolled out thoroughly. Employees learned to recognize bias and value each person, regardless of appearance or background. It wasn't just a system upgrade, it was a cultural shift. At college panels and roundtable discussions, Elise and Jada continued inspiring the next generation. They spoke of perseverance, voice, and presence, the idea that everyone deserves a seat in life. The story ends with a still image at the Aurora Link terminal. The poster of Elise and Jada is displayed proudly, bathed in warm golden light, whispering a message into the hearts of all who pass by. The future isn't measured by how you look, but by what you build. Outside the station, Gillian stands quietly, gazing in, recognizing the world she once tried to define had redefined itself without her. She now understood. Life isn't about the seat, it's about the journey of becoming. Today's story isn't just about a seat on a luxury train, it's about perseverance. It's about fairness, the kind that so many people are still quietly fighting for every single day. Elise and Jada showed us that the right to be respected is not a privilege for the few. It's a sacred human right. They didn't shout. They didn't resist with anger. They stood tall with grace and strength, and simply by showing up and succeeding, they changed an entire broken system. As for Gillian, her story serves as a powerful reminder to anyone still hiding behind privilege to diminish others. It proves that judgment and bias don't build the future. Only empathy, respect, and the courage to change do. If this video left you feeling the power of perseverance and justice, I hope you walk away inspired, reminded never to give up your right to be yourself, to be respected, and to stand proudly in the light you deserve. And if you believe, like I do, that the world needs more stories like this, stories that make us love harder, understand more, and fight for what's right, then hit that subscribe button so you never miss another one. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. What moved you most about this story? Which character stayed with you the longest? Or maybe you've lived through something similar. I'd love to hear your voice and connect. Thank you so much for watching, and please, share this video with someone you care about. Together we can build a community where fairness, respect, and kindness aren't ideals. They're the norm.